Now, there is an artist that I'm kind of mimicking in a certain way, Anders Zorns. Please. Anders Zorns lived from 1860 to 1920. His palette of color, he used 3 colors, and they're quite interesting. He would use titanium white, yellow ochre, vermilion or cadmium red, and ivory black. I don't use black in my palette, but I understand, I've seen his paintings, they are gorgeous. But working with a limited palette of color gives you the opportunity to explore those 3 colors that are very important to us. And it helps limit your ability to overmix all the other colors. I have had several students in the past that have put down every color they have on in their suitcase of colors, as I call it, and they don't need them. And even at my workshops, I don't go over 5 colors because I want the students to understand how to mix those colors together to get different variations. Even with the same tube, you can paint, or tubes, you can paint a winter scene and you can paint a fall scene if you mix the colors properly. So look up Anders Zorn. Anders Zorn, he's a wonderful artist, was a wonderful artist, and has a variety of things that he did with color. Now, this is what we're painting tonight. I hope you can see this without getting the reflection of all these lights here. Let's zoom this up here a little bit. It's a Lake Superior scene. And there we go, got a little bit better there. And it's kind of the foggy, overcast day that you can run into up there. Sometimes it's very stormy, but when it's stormy, it does have wonderful character to the shoreline and to the water. This is kind of calm for up there, but it's on the north shore of the Upper Peninsula, and it's the south shore of the Lake Superior, the biggest inland body of water. It's actually considered, in reality, an ocean. So everything is very overcast. It's very grayed down. So this is why I picked those colors. And I did some cross mixing before I started. This is the blue with all the other colors in it. This is the green with the other colors in it. And this is the burnt sienna with all the other colors in it. So everything gets grayed down quite a bit, depending on how you cross mix it. I'm a great proponent of painting the painting, not the photograph. So I'm going to be trying to get this a little bit more colorful than what it appears to be in the photograph. So if you have any questions, my wife will field the questions to me. And I'm going to start off by wetting the surface just a little bit. I mean, just a tiny bit, not much. I don't want a lot of water to be flowing around, nor do I want to wait for the paint to dry. So if you have any questions, please ask. I can answer them while I'm painting or in between while I'm waiting for things to dry. So I'm taking the ultramarine blue and I'm going to take a little bit of the sap green here. And I'm going to gray the sky down. You can see that's a little bit on the gray side there, so I'm going to add a little bit more blue. In fact, that's a little bit too much for what my taste is for this. I want to keep it on the simpler side.
Just to let you know that Elaine Woods, Kern Woods, is saying it's rainy in Ontario.
Oh.
Elsie said greetings. Hi, Elsie. Dawn,
thank you for coming.
Dawn has sound now, and she thanks us. Elaine said the sound sounds good. Hi, Patricia. She said hi, Dale and Arlene.
Hello.
Do you have a nice little Thanksgiving prayer for us? So it would be greatly appreciated for our turkeys so they cook well. Elizabeth Ward is from Toronto and said hi.
Thank you for coming tonight.
And Beverly Spencer says hi there.
So I'm adding a little bit of green to the sky here. Skies are just not blue or grayed down, whatever. I'm trying to get this just to function as an interesting sky. It's pretty flat in the photograph. So I'm trying to make this a tad more stormy looking, a little bit more interesting. Then I'm going to water it down quite a bit as we come into the greenery here, or as I call it, the forest. And then I'm going to add a little bit more color to the water. I did add a shoreline back here for the simple fact that I felt that it needed a little bit more anchoring back there. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some of the green to the woods here. And what I'm putting down is basically going to show up when I'm done to a certain extent. And anything that you put down originally will influence what you're going to put on top of it. So I'm being a little bit, like I said, a little bit more colorful with the watercolor at the beginning. I always like to paint with a little bit more color anyways. So I'm giving this a little bit extra oomph to the hues rather than following what's in the photograph. Photographs are great for ideas, for idea of the light and the basic hues that we're trying to use. But I'm not one to follow everything that I see. Which, if you've taken one of my classes, you would realize that. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna at this point. I'm always telling the students you want to paint a little bit more intense at the beginning, and then you can gray things down as you move through it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the toothbrush, just with water on it, and a little bit of the blue. I cannot substantiate using too much of the burnt sienna for the fact that it will be kind of, I would say, out of its world on this, because we don't have a lot of warm color in the painting. Now, I added a little bit of that texture to begin with, and I've toned down the burnt sienna quite a bit because it's going to stick out like a color that will not go with the rest of the painting. And while this is still wet, I'm using my Chinese brush here. While it's still wet, I can manipulate certain things in here for extra color. I'm adding a little bit more green up in here. And the timing of watercolor is very important. If it's too late, you'll end up with those lovely blooms that everybody talks about. And I'm trying to get the timing of this down to where I don't have those blooms showing. And I'll probably have to use the hairdryer, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of leave this alone for a moment here, but I still want to add in some more blues in here. And I want this to be kind of flawless in transition from one color to another. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the paper towel along the edge so that this doesn't seep back in, and that will cause a problem. I'm going to pick up a couple of puddles here and there. But you have to wait for the glistening to go away before you even use the hairdryer, because you're taking a chance of it spreading where you don't want it to. The hairdryer is something I very seldom use. Usually I will use it during a demonstration for people. for the fact that it saves time. If I'm in the studio by myself, I sit here, sip my coffee, and I watch the paint dry. But I got the color variations I was hoping for in the sky. I don't want the stars showing up though. So I'm going to try to cover those up just a little bit and hope that I don't get blooms in the sky. If I do, it's all my fault. And I'm also going to take up the little bit of the dripping of the color there. But we'll see how this dries. If you have any questions at this time, please ask. I am working on indigo paper. That's what I always work on, 300 pound. I'm using core watercolor paints tonight, except for the ultramarine blue, because they were out of it at Cheap Joe's, and I got Cheap Joe's American Journey, which is an excellent color. But the green and the burnt sienna, I am working with the core watercolor paint, which is my normal. And I'll show you the brushes here in a second. I'm using two rosemary brushes. One is a 3/4 inch pointed, I call it a cat tongue. This one is an oval. It's a 1/2 inch. And I'm using a Chinese brush. It doesn't have a number on it. I got a set of 4 at Christmas. This is squirrel. I have wolf, and I have another squirrel and goat. I haven't used the other 3 yet, but I will in the future. And then I'm using my 1-inch flat ox hair that I've had for a long time, about 45 or 50 years. It's a great brush, and if you take care of them, they'll last forever. And then I have a number 6 round by Art Sign. Art Sign is a wonderful manufacturer of brushes. They still make them. And I also have a rigger, which is called a liner or a rigger, depending on what manufacturer you get it from. But I have another one that's about this long. And it's very narrow, and this is the only thing I use for detail. I only have 6 brushes out. I probably only use 4. And I have my trusty wife's toothbrush. I do clean it before I put it back, as long as it's not with any of the phthalo colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sop up this little puddle right here, and I want to expedite and a little bit here. But I got a lot more color going on in here, which is what I was hoping for. Even the lighter spots up in here, I'm not concerned about it. So I will take these and I'll put them over there, and I'm going to use the hairdryer for a moment. Okay, any questions before I go any further? Let's see what my wife comes up with over here. She's feeding the questions to me, by the way. I can't do 2, 3 things at one time.
Nope, nothing. Just you're getting some little thumbs ups.
Okay, now, right back here, I'm going to bring the board up a little bit closer to you, but right back here, there is a pencil line. And there's one down below it too. I don't want to paint anything in here again. I want this to remain fairly light. So I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm going to erase that pencil line. You should be able to do it through the watercolor. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to take it right on off. I usually use a 7B pencil so that it's easily removed. It's a softer lead pencil. And I always tell the students, if you have pencil lines that are left, if they're not bothersome, you can leave them alone. If they are bothersome, take your kneaded eraser, and I'm kind of pressing down a little bit to pull up. I got it down to where it's not bothersome anymore. Now, I'm going to always paint from background to foreground. Try not to paint from foreground to background because you're painting over things and around things. So the basic block in is I blocked in the large areas and I will go to the small areas. And then you are painting from background to foreground. That's repetitive until the background is set and you start finishing off things. And you're painting your values from lighter values to darker values. These white dots up here are not that bothersome to me. I can get most of them covered actually. And you're painting your colors a little bit more intense at the beginning to less intense as you're going through the painting. So you're graying things down as you need to. The only way you can get your color more intense later on is by painting the same color over the same color, and it will become more intense. And you're also painting your pigment from a lighter value to darker value, and you'll find out that in watercolor, your pigment dries up to 50% lighter when it dries, and it depends on the pigment. Also the manufacturer sometimes, but it's usually the pigment itself. Some of it will dry extremely light. So again, not touching this back here. And I'm going to take my Chinese brush here. I find that the Chinese brush is really a nice brush to use to manipulate different shapes and so forth. So I'm going to come back in here first, and I'm going to take the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to slightly add a little bit of green to this, and I mean just a tad of the burnt sienna. And that will slightly gray it down. And I don't overmix my paint here, by the way. So when I put down a brush stroke, it has various colors in it. And every 3 or 4 brush strokes, I will change the color, the temperature, the value, whatever the case may be, so that it's not all the same. And I'm going to add a little bit more burnt sienna to that as I come out. And this is going to dry lighter. And knowing what to anticipate with experience, because it can't be taught, is how it dries. And I'm going to take a little bit more green. This time I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna just to the green. Then I'm going to take the blue and I'm going to add that to it. I'm going to give it a little bit more value change, color change, temperature change, all at the same time. And you want to keep your edges as soft as you can for as long as you can. Have a paper towel alongside of you to pick up anything off the brush you don't need. And you can see that I have a little bit of color variation in here, which is what I was looking for. And then I'm going to take a little bit more of the blue and I'm going to go right on down to the shoreline here. And I'm going to make this a little bit darker and add in a little bit of small brush strokes here because I'm not going to go back into this most likely. And I'm going to add a little bit of the burnt sienna with the green toning it down into the shoreline down here, just to give it a little bit of variance. And And again, I'm always playing with the color, not worried about the water just yet. And I'm coming into the darker trees here. And again, I'm going to allow it to kind of meld in, soften. So we're going to use a little bit more water with this, but I'm adding a little bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to dry the brush off on my paper towel. And again, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add the next row of trees. I want a little bit more ultramarine blue in this. I want this a little bit darker. I'm going to dry the brush off fairly well, and I'm going to kind of use bigger brush strokes in here. And I'm going to add a little bit more blue as I go down because it's receiving a little bit less light, what little light there is there today on this photograph. And bring it and meld it right into this. I can go in and separate this later and make this come out if I need to. Excuse me. And I'm going to use a little bit more blue down in here because I want this thing fairly colorful. Now, at this point, while this is still damp, I'm going to take that ultramarine blue and I'm going to put that right in here like so and let it kind of fuse in with the rest of the color, and it will give it a little bit different look. It will cool it down a little bit. And then I'm going to go right into the next tree, allowing that to meld in with this tree here. And I'm not concerned about it melding into that tree because the fact that I can go back in and separate things later. I've used a little bit more blue here with the green, a little bit with the burnt sienna. I want to paint around the house, which I don't paint around things that often, but I want to have that roof retain its integrity. And I don't mind light coming through the trees here. It adds a little bit of interest, if anything. And I'm taking the side of the brush here, dry it off. And I'm much more descriptive on this tree here than the other ones because it's in the focal point area. And I'm being very random with the branches. Us humans have a tendency of being more even, more balanced, and we've got to try to keep it more random. So try to think odd shapes. And I'm adding in some of the greens in here with the blue. Then I'm going to add a little bit more blue in here. Take a little bit of the green, and that will help tone it down.
Can I interrupt you?
Just a minute.
Okay.
And I want to bring that color right on back to here, ever so slightly. It's going to dry by the time I get back there. But I'm going to bring up a couple light trees in the background. And in a second, I'm going to let my wife interrupt me a little bit. And I'm going to bring the last tree that we're seeing in the background here, a little bit cooler. Dry the brush off on the paper towel. And I'm just sweeping back and forth to create the simple boughs of the pine and then let it bleed into what I've got going on here. And I can take a stop right here at this section for my wife to talk to everybody. Okay, take it away.
All right. We had two ladies ask us about the Chinese brushes. And let me get to Dawn and asked about the brushes. It wanted to know if a site to go to. Here's the box that they come in.
It's a pretty cool box.
And I will post in the comments. We updated our paintbrush handout worksheet that explains all the brushes Dale uses, and they're from Rosemary.
This is the one that was in with them that I'm using tonight.
So they're from Rosemary Brushes, that's in England. They're handmade. They're very reasonable in price. But I will include the handout because they're hot links. So if you click on the brush where it says click here or buy brush here, it'll take you directly to England, lickety split. And you can purchase the brush from them.
They're really nice brushes. They've got some wood handles. These are heavy duty plastic handles. And this is a wood handle painted.
So I also want to let you guys know that we are affiliate members to Rosemary Brushes. So we get a couple cents for everyone that he buys. And then we get paid in brushes or other art supplies they supply. But I will include the brush handout worksheet. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to pull up some of this puddling here, just a little bit. And as I said before, you could take a look at the color variations in here from the warm burnt sienna mingling with the blue greens and the greens and the blues. And then I put this in here as the backdrop. There's another darker tree that's going to go in here, and there'll be a little bit of a gap opening in here later on. So my next approach in this is to paint the house and come down to the rocks and then into the water here. Some people would be kind of upset I have a couple little spots up in here. I can get rid of those later on if need be. I'll just call them sparrows for right now. So I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna, and I have to be careful not to go outside where I get foreign color to the rest of this subject matter. So isolated color, you may want to call it, because if I start using brown heavily, it's not going to go with the rest of all these muted colors. It will be kind of an outcast. So I'm going to be very careful with the color variations at this point. So the cabin itself will be a muted brown. And I mean very muted. And I'm going to paint both sides. I'm going to again leave the roof alone until I travel down. I'll come back and I'll fill it in later. For the simple fact, again, I don't want to lose the integrity of the building there, but I don't want it to stick out like a sore thumb. There is a white painted trim on the building. I'm virtually ignoring that for the fact that I don't have anything else in here that would help match it. So I'm taking the sap green. So there's always things that you have to leave out. Not important. Leave it alone. So I'm taking kind of a muted bluish green here. And I'll work on getting color variations of things later on settled in so that we can see what the difference is. I'm adding a little bit more blue behind it at this point. I have not painted this before, so this is kind of going along of, let's see what happens. And I like painting like that once in a while. So I'm adding a little bit more bluish green up front here. That was a fly that just came by. He's a pet fly. Been in here for about a week. So I'm adding a little bit of green up front here. And I'm painting fairly rapidly for the fact that I don't want any hard edges to show up except in the trees up here. I don't want any hard edges down here. I don't want separations of things going on. So I'm taking a little bit more blue here. And I'm going to add it in. And I'm going to take a little bit of the green, because I have enough green up there, mixing it in here like with the front lawn, big sweeping movements. And then we get into this grass area. That grass area is what I would call a raw sienna yellow ochre. I'm going to add a little bit of the burnt sienna, not a lot. Mix that up over there. I'm only going to use a little bit of it with the green. And it's going to warm up a little bit. That way it doesn't stick out. And that's what I'm looking for. It'll look like isolated color. I'm going to dry brush it in here a little bit. And that's the last thing I want to show up as far as that type of color. I got a little bit up here, a little bit out here. But it's a little bit warmer as it comes towards us. And that's what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to take the ultramarine blue. And I'm kind of graying it down, which will slowly seep into the water here. And I'm using the side of the brush. I'm going to use a little bit more, I don't know, finesse with this. I'm not covering every little thing down here. I want to leave a little bit up to the imagination. I'm going to grab a little bit of green down here. So I'm going to pull some of that color down.
I just want to let everybody know that I just looked up on Rosemary, and that box of those 4 brushes is just a little under $34, and it's U.S. money.
Yes, doesn't go to overseas.
Well, we have people in Canada, honey, that work.
Yes, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
So I think the Canadian and the English might be the same. I don't know. Is the euro the same?
I don't know what to...
I don't know.
Not aware. So I'm pulling in some of this blue. Now, out here, I've got to be a little bit on the careful side, so I'm taking the side of the brush and I'm kind of sweeping across that. I'm getting a dry brush look, a little bit of character to the water. I'm not worried about the waves, but I'm going to bring this right up into the rock formation here. I'm going to add a little bit of color variation out here while it's still wet to kind of feel about the warmth of or the waves coming up, a little bit of texture, so that we have a little bit of value change. I'm going to cover up these spots down here with that same color. And we have basically almost blocked in the whole thing here. I still have the roof, and I want to put this dark value there. Now I'm going to come up and I'm going to paint the roof of the house. And that's going to be a little bit lighter. And I don't care if color comes in and seeps in from around it, which it doesn't look like it is, but it kind of has the feeling that everything now has its place. Nothing will be done with the sky again. There's a few little dark dots there. I can take my 1-inch brush. I always tell you how to fix little mistakes or big mistakes if possible. I'm going to take that and I'm going to lift that out to where it is not noticeable at all. Right now, these light spots up in the sky, they almost look like stars. They're not, but they almost look like it. And then I'll just kind of tap that dry. I'm not worried about those lights, but now everything is blocked in and it has a color, a value, a temperature on it. And it's as intense as it's going to get because I'm going to start working this a little bit darker. We have a peninsula out here. This is this part right here. And then we have a tree that's going to be a little bit darker that comes down to the shoreline. And we have some darkness that's in here. And then I'm going to be working the rest of that up to the rest of the cabin and so forth. So everything has a tone on it. This will probably remain pretty much the same because I want that light hole in there. And you can tell that the configuration of the trees are much different than they were. So I'm going to take my number 6 round brush and I'm going to give this a little bit of value change and starting right about here, going to my left. And I'm going to grab the ultramarine blue. I don't want to do anything with this. In fact, before I start, there's a couple pencil marks that I don't want. I might add a few little things here and there because I don't like this being too equal here. So I think what I'll do is I'll fix that right away. And I'm going to give this a little bit of a different height here. And I'm going to give this one out here a little bit different height, just so that they're more uneven looking. And then what I'll do is I'll drag a little bit of that color back into the bottom. It's not going to really make it any darker, but it's going to kind of meld with the shape a little bit more. Now I'm going to start with this tree here. And I'm going to take the ultramarine blue, some of the sap green, a little bit of the burnt sienna, not much. There we go, just grade it down just a little bit more ultramarine blue. And I'm going to use a lot of water with this, or more water, because I'm going to be using less water as I move up. So this is going to start right about here. Dry the brush off, and I'm going to take that pigment that I put down here and kind of spread it around a little bit. Sometimes I'll put pigment down on the board, wipe the brush off, and then manipulate that pigment. Doesn't have to be, every time you touch the board, doesn't have to be the same pigment on here. And as I come down, I'm going to get darker so it plays off of this. So that these darks here will make this appear to come forward. And I'm going to use a little bit more ultramarine blue, and I'm going to use a tad more burnt sienna with this. And I'm using the side of the brush after I've tapped it off on the paper towel. Then I'm going to get this a little bit darker. And I'm not painting over everything I originally put down because I want that to show through. That gives us a little bit of depth with the painting. And I'm going to bring it right down to the shoreline. And I'm going to make that shoreline a little bit warmer. There's a lot of iron in the rock up there. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna in on this and let it meld together. And I'll also bring that shoreline closer, being a warm color. And give it a little bit of character down here so it's different than this one. Like so. And we bring that up. So we're starting to get some more value changes in here. They're darker values. I'm going to darken this up just a little bit more. And it will kind of meld with the rest of it, since the rest of it's got a little bit of water in it. A little bit of moisture. But I do want this to separate just a little bit more from this peninsula back here. Now, I have some choices here to make. There's many times I'll allow the painting to tell me what I want to do, what I need to do. If I leave this just as it is and go to the next tree, that gives me some value changes that I was kind of looking for. It's not like that in the photograph. In fact, I did draw it a little bit differently. But I do like the change of value here, that this tree is out in front, and I'll manipulate it a little bit later if I need to. But I like to have the open door to other possibilities. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and I'm going to use the ultramarine blue here with a little bit of the green in it to gray it down, because everything in this photograph is grayed down. And I'm going to take my ultramarine blue and I'm going to manipulate it. This will kind of link this with this. And I'm going to bring this up like so, so that this tree is falling back now, which is what I was looking for. And I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna here, and I'm going to put it right in here so that it does link with a little bit of warm color down here. And the way that it, when it has a little bit of moisture on it, it will soften all by itself. And I'm always telling the students, keep your edges as soft as you can for as long as you can. You can always sharpen them up, but it's going to take more effort to soften them. So I'm going to go into the big tree. And I'm taking the side of my brush. I'm going to tap this brush off a little bit, being somewhat descriptive up on top. It's going to be lighter up here because it's further away from us. And it will dry lighter. As I come down, I'm going to be much darker, so I'm adding a little bit more blue. Are there any questions at all?
Nope.
There's got to be some questions here. Wake up. And I'm adding a lot more dark in here to make this a lot more descriptive. Now, as I come down, I made a swoop through the burnt sienna to warm this up a little bit. Because if it comes down towards us, it's going to be a little bit warmer. And again, I'm not covering everything in here. And I'm allowing this tree to overlap onto the tree that's in the background. And I'm going to bring that right on down. Into here. And I'm not going to make these boughs that evident because they fall into a dark area. And that dark area is going to kind of just soften it a little bit. And then I'm going to bring this down to here like so, up against the house, like this. So now we have a variety of values here. And I'm looking at this tree that's over here. Before I go any further, which I don't have to rush to get to this side is going to be very simple for the fact that this is the focal point area, not out here, not out there. So this is the area that we're going to be looking at more so.
I have a question.
Good, question time.
From Elsie, the area where you just put some paint,
Yes.
in parentheses, she says between the two trees, and there is a glare. Could you lift your board for a second so she can see the color?
I'll show it as much of a glare that is possible. Let me take some light off of it. I don't know how it's going to show up. Because the glare is hard to get rid of in many cases.
Kind of slight, go forward a little bit. You're almost cutting it off. So,
How does that look, Elsie?
right, yeah, that's okay. She hasn't said anything yet.
Okay, I got to put it back down. I got to bring these lights.
Okay, Elsie said that's good, thank you.
Okay. It's going to cost you an extra 25 cents. So anyways, I'm being very conscious of a number of things at this point. Some of these edges that come down, I want to show that we have things going on down here that I'm not going to cover this all up. I'm going to allow some light to be through here, but I kind of want it to slope down gradually and kind of have a soft edge and an edge that has a little bit of movement to it. Now I'm going to come to this tree here that's back here. It's a bigger tree. And I'm going to handle that a little bit cooler, a little bit softer. And I'm using the brush on the side here. And I'm going to bring it all the way up to the edge up here. And I'm not going to put too much emphasis on it for the fact I don't want your eye drawn to that tree equally as this one right here. And I may add more to this. And I'm allowing a lot of that blue in here to show through. Now I'm going to take a lot of blue, a little bit of the green, and I'm going to paint this area in a little bit more. And I'm going to take the toothbrush with a lot of blue on it and a little bit more water. And I'm going to take the paper towel and cover the house. So that I don't get it everywhere. I'm going to try to meld this together just a little bit. Then I'll take the brush, my smaller 6-round brush here, and I'm going to give this a pattern back in here that is kind of reminiscent of some tree trunks coming up here a little bit. It's got a little bit of warmth in it. So it looks like there's a multitude of different trees coming up in that area. I'm going to paint around the edge of the house here. So again, that I don't lose that. Having this tree back here, again, fall back lighter than this one. But I'm looking at this tree here and this one here. This I'm going to make an adjustment right now for the fact that I need to have it separate. It's already dry. You feel it with the back of your hand because you don't want to put oil on the canvas. And I'm going to add a little bit of darkness to this by swinging back and forth, mainly down towards the ground. Up here, I'm going to leave that alone because it looks like it's picking up some light. Now, before I get down in here, I am going to take my 1-inch brush, get rid of that paper towel, use a clean one, and I want to pick up a little bit of the lightness of the trunk in here by lifting. And it's a damp brush. I'm lifting up part of the trunk, not all of the trunk, for the fact that we got to be able to see overlapping of the boughs that are going up. And I'm lifting up a little bit more than what's in the photo. I'll work with this later. And I'm going to come down to this in the house now. And so I'm going to paint the house a little bit more colorful, a little bit darker. So I'm taking the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna. I'm going to take a little bit of green because we're only using 3 colors, so we want to be a little bit more fun with it. I'm going to take a little bit of blue, and just because it's a small side doesn't mean you can't enter other colors in on it. But the idea is to have fun and explore the different possibilities with those 3 colors. And if those 3 colors don't work, change out a tube and go to another color. So I'm taking this blue right on down so that it kind of melds up with the cabin, the bottom of it at least. I will take the front part of the cabin and I'm going to take that cast shadow from the roof along through there. I'm going to leave it there for a second. And then I'm going to take just a damp brush, and I'm going to pull some of that color down so that that cast shadow is not so dark. It's not going to be that dark on the overcast day. We have cast shadows are usually very soft. And then we have the chimney here, which I'll give that a spark of the burnt sienna. And I'm also going to give this a little bit more burnt sienna right there, which will help us turn the corner. But you don't want to show in this particular movement and type of scene where it's overcast, where you have real fast, sharp turns into the shadow. Now, out here, I'm erasing these pencil lines that are bothersome, which is fairly simple. If they're bothersome, you never want to use an abrasive eraser like a pink pearl or whatever. That can ruin your painting in a second by tearing up the paper. One thing here is I want this tree to go all the way up to the top. Now, the other thing I want to do before I go any further into this is I want to take and I want to lift up a little bit of the color down here with the kneaded eraser on the horizon, just a little bit. And I want to lift up just a little bit in here. It's minute lifting, but I want this to show up just a tad more. The kneaded eraser becomes a very important part on subtleties of lifting. Now, let's get into the rocks itself in the ground area. The ground area is kind of, I don't know, kind of mushed together in the photograph to a certain degree. So I'm taking the blue and I'm going to go to the blue and I'm going to kind of dry brush it with the brush on its side. And I'm going to, this is still wet up in here, which is what I was hoping for.
Diane Coffin said the painting is beautiful.
Thank you. Everything I always do is always available for sale. I have to tell you that. Only because Miss Poppy needs a new pair of shoes for Christmas. Just kidding.
She needs a new squeaky.
Yeah, she needs a new squeaky. Like I need another hole in my head. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna here with a little bit of the blue. And at this point of the painting, you really want to slow it down. The first part of the painting is always very quick. The second part is a little speeded up. And the third part, slowed down. And then the third part, you're at a crawl. I'm at a crawl at this point. I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna. And I want to draw some of this color out. It doesn't have to make sense because back here is just a shape. I'm going to put a little bit back here too. I'm always looking at the color harmony of the painting so I don't isolate any color. And this is one way to do it, is you slow your process down, take a look at it, decide what you want to do, and then every brush stroke you put down is going to count for something. So I'm cleaning up my palette at this point because I don't want my paints getting mushy, dirty. So I'm going back and I'm going to remix a little bit of color. You're really not wasting that much paint. I'm going to take a little bit of the green, a little bit of the blue, a little bit more blue here. And painting with three colors, it can be a lot of fun. It's a journey. It's an exploration of how you can handle different things. And I'm painting in a direction at this point on pulling things down to the water. I'm kind of ignoring what's there, and I'm going from experience. The more experience you have in painting, whether it's successes or failures, you'll find that it will always be helpful. Your failures are going to create your successes anyways, because you'll find out what not to do. So very slowly I'm bringing this down, and then I'll start changing the texture, the mood, whatever the case may be. Hopping back and forth. Going to take a little bit of burnt sienna, and I'm going to add a little bit of darkness down here. It's got a little bit of burnt sienna in it. And I'm going to add a few dark spots that will imitate divots in the land, rocks, or whatever the case may be. The house is going to have very little detail in it. But this is where you slow that process down. And there's many times that I will look at it for a day or so, the next day, a week, whatever the case may be, just to see if everything's in the right place. Now, I'm going to use a lot of water with the blue, and I'm going to meld it in with the water here ever so slightly so that there's not an abrupt change from the rock shore to the water. And I'm going to smooth out my movement so that not everything is that busy. Because otherwise, if it's all busy the same way, it's not going to look good. So I'm going to add a little bit more green down in here. A little bit of green up near the cabin. But this is kind of really a fun thing to get to do and keep it simple. I got sparrows landing in the water out there. Because this is the basis of what I'm going to finish it off to be, which will be some rocks. So again, you have to have patience in what you're doing. I'm going to take and I'm going to tint the roof because it's way too light. When you trap a light between all these darks, it's going to look like it glows a little bit too much. So I am taking a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of the grayed down ultramarine blue. Put a little bit in there, tap it off a little bit, just so that the roof on this thing looks a little bit on the rougher side. I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna mixed in with a little bit of that ultramarine blue and so forth. And I'm going to dry brush this in here. I want to bring this out just a little bit more. And then I'm going to do the same thing to some of the rocks out in here so that, or rocks or foreground. I was going to eventually do more rocks to pull that color out. And a little bit down by the water itself. Now the water has to be toned down again because right now it's too light. It's a little bit darker than the sky value up there. And even the sky value is a little bit too light, so I'm going to evaluate that. So what I have to do is clean this puddle up again. So this being all wet here, I'm looking at the transition of things here so that we have a little bit more variety of value and of color and of temperature. And this is got some warmth here. That warmth that came across with the grasses never would have worked with the subject matter I was trying to portray.
You need more water?
What's that?
Clean water?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
No fudgsicles though.
No fudgsicles while painting. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna right here in that corner. Not over here, but right here. The reason being is it will turn from shadow to the lighter side a little bit nicer. Not concerned about the windows. That's the last thing that I would even worry about. But I am going to, I'm leaving this dry, so I'm talking about other things here. I still want to give a few little areas of some lighter value trees coming up over these and drag that color way up into the sky. So I'm going to do maybe 3 or 5 of them, never even numbers. And I'm kind of stopping and starting here so that it's not a constant light line that goes up. And I'll bring one a little bit further away, a little bit. Like so. And this is where you go around touching up things, waiting for things to dry, or you sit on your hands and watch it dry. I prefer sitting on my hands and not playing with it. I'm going to bring up a few trees offshore that are leafless. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna, not a lot of it, and I'm going to spritz it back in here, trying to balance off a little bit of color, some out front here. Like so. Then I'm going to go into the water and I'm going to reevaluate the sky, and I've got pencil lines down here I kind of want to get rid of. And there's a couple things I need to add down in here also that I just realized should not be there. This shoreline right here needs to come down closer to us. It cannot be even with this one. And Pat, if you're still watching, you should have caught that. There we go. And while I'm mixing up a little bit of dark here, I'm going to add a little bit of character for the door in the cabin here. And again, I am not making high contrast statements at this point for the fact that it would stick out too much. Nothing fancy. I do want to mix up a little bit of dark for right in back of the cabin here, just to make it stick out a little bit more. I'll deal with the shoreline a little bit more after I adjust the water here. So I'm going to go to a bigger brush for the water. So I'm using my 1/2 inch kind of oval brush. And I need to tone that water down. And I'm going to take the ultramarine blue, a little bit of the burnt sienna. I'm still reevaluating the sky. And here I come in with a little bit more character in the water. Bring it right on up to the shoreline. And back here, I want to kind of tone it down so there's not a big separation. And I want to soften this edge right here just by adding a little bit of water to it. Add a little bit more ultramarine blue up against the shoreline a little bit. I don't want to go into any great detail with the water because it's not part of the focal point. Now, the thing I was talking about is the sky. This is way too light in here. So it's time to take the big brush. And you can see on how light it dried from the original part. I'm going to take the ultramarine blue and a little bit of the sap green. And I mean a little bit. And a touch of the burnt sienna, which I'll grab over here. So I'm not grabbing too much. And I am going to lightly spray the area with water so I get a nice soft transition. And I just bring it on up, bring it over, a little bit into the, between the trees here. I'm not going to overbrush it because I'll disturb what's there already. And that has changed the whole look of the painting because the sky, the light of the sky will dictate a number of things to you. And that is how the light is coming in. I'm going to give the sky a little bit more character than what's in the photograph. But that changing the sky unified everything down here. Very quickly it did. I would take a little bit more blue, mix it into here.
Where are you?
And I don't want to overbrush this by any means because then I'll have problems. So I'm trying to be as very quick with this as possible. I kind of like that sweep of the movement there. And then a little bit of blue down here with that shoreline in the background, or what appears to be the shoreline. And then I'll take that blue right across through there. Now, the last part of this is handling this area in here. Not so much down here, because it's out of the focal point area. You'd never want to handle things equally everywhere. You want to kind of drift it off in some areas out of the focal point area. So I am looking at handling this very simply. I don't want to get carried away with it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add some burnt sienna together, a little bit of sap green, since we don't have a lot of choices tonight, and a lot of ultramarine blue. A little bit more ultramarine blue. And I get a grayed down blue-green. And I want to come in here and I want to add some discerning darks into the foreground here.
Come here, give it to me.
My daughter's learned how to talk. She hasn't stopped since. And I'm adding just a few things here and there to unify some of these values because they're all pretty much the same, very colorful, but too much the same. So I'm trying to break that up. Ever so slightly.
Give it to me. Don't just ask me. Come on.
There's no charge for the dog barking. She's actually kind of funny. Needs to have too much attention. So I'm adding just some darks in here, like so. Trying to keep it extremely simple. As I said, I don't want it to be busy down here. And I think what I'll do in this area here is I'm going to take a little bit of this grayed down green, and I'm going to give it a little bit more of an intensity. I know it's going to draw your eye to it a little bit more, but I'm going to go right up to the cabin with it. And then leave this area blue. And I'm going to take that same green and I'm going to move it over here just a little bit so that it kind of balances off. So I'm always looking at balancing off the colors a little bit more. And I think I could probably even get away with a little bit of green into the water here, into the foreground of the water, just to pull that color out a little bit. You'll find that if you have the values correct, which is always number one after the drawing, and you have the temperature correct and the intensities correct, you can be off on the color. It doesn't have to be a realistic color, and it will still work right. So I'm trying to combine different things in here. I am going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna on the toothbrush, and I'm going to give this a little bit of color variation down in here. And then I'll show you what I'll do with some of the rocks. Because we're getting in on the time a little bit, I'm going to leave this dry. And I think we need to show that somebody's home. So we're going to have a little bit of smoke coming up from here. And drift it right on up over the pine trees. Soften it along the edges, especially away from the main fire. Bring it right across and up and out. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a few rocks down in here. Not a lot. And I'm going to add just a few touches of the blue and a little bit of the green. And since the light is coming from over here off the lake, I'm going to tone down this part of the roof and bring cast shadow across like so, except that I didn't want too much flowing in. Just like this to bring it across, just to tone the roof down a little bit more, and it will meld with, so you can see a cast shadow coming from the trees. And I'm still looking at this tree here. It's still not coming towards me fast enough. So I'm going to make this a little bit darker in certain areas. When you get into this part of the painting, it's actually, you can spend more time doing less work on the painting because you're looking at how you can add a little bit here, a little bit there. And again, I'm not touching the top of the tree for the fact that I like that kind of falling away. But in here, I want this to push this back by making this darker. Our darks are always darker nearest us, and they get lighter as they go away. But the lights are lighter nearer us, and they get darker as they go away. So what happens is that there's less contrast of value in the background. And I don't want to redesign that or to get it darker for the fact that I just like the way it kind of softens in there without getting into too much and maybe a tree in here, and coming off over here. Minor little things. Like so. A couple of dark trees in there. I'm going to darken in a little bit in the window here, top of the door. I'm not going to do the other window. I'm going to come in here and do a few very quick edges along the rocks. Just to give this an idea that it's kind of a rocky beach without adding too much. And I think one of the last things I'm going to do, I'm going to tip this up so I can see it, is I need to bring some of the forest out beyond the edges here. So I'm mixing up a dark with the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue. And sometimes the more overlapping areas we have, the better off we are. And I'm going to soften them a little bit with my fingers so they don't stick out too much. And redo some of the darks in back here. Just to add a little bit of character to the scene. Sometimes when I tip it up away from the light, it's better, I can see it more. And I'm adding just a few darks here and there. Just a little bit, not too much. And I'm going to take the tape off and see where we're at. Lots of times when you take the tape off, it gives you the illusion of a mat or a border. It also, with the white of the paper, tells you how dark your darks are, how light your lights are. Gives you kind of an idea of where you went from the white of the paper. I'm very careful in taking off this tape because this is a softer paper than what normal paper is, so you cannot go in and treat it a little bit more rougher like you can with other papers. But this is just kind of a fun watercolor with 3 colors, and I chose colors that I thought might work. And this is the photograph here, if you can see that. Hope you can without a light on or a flash of light on it. And how much more color I put in. I reduced, let's see if I can get this out of the way and that out of the way. Turn this a little bit. But you kind of see what the scene looked like on how dark it was. I lightened up the values and I also gave it more color. There's a number of things that I could do, which I'm going to do one of them before we leave. I want to thank you all for watching.
Just to let you know that Angel Rogers gave you a big heart.
Thank you very much.
Dawn said stunning. Elsie said well done, Dale.
Thank you.
Pat, yes, she's still here, Dale. She said
Thank you, Pat.
She said love it. Beverly said beautiful painting. Looking forward to the snow scene next month. Thank you. And Elizabeth said lovely Dale. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Both of you. Thank you.
So I want to thank you all for watching, and I want you to all have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and don't fall in the snow.
Don't eat too much.
Don't eat too much turkey. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.